The millionaire panicked mid-meeting, until the maid took over and stunned the clients. Welcome back to our channel, where extraordinary stories unfold in the most unexpected ways. Today, we're bringing you an incredible tale that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about success, judgment, and hidden talents. This is the story of a millionaire businessman who thought he had everything figured out, until the most unlikely person in his life showed him what true leadership really looks like. Before we dive into this amazing journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our incredible stories. And please, drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're listening to this story from. We love connecting with our global audience. Are you tuning in from New York, Tokyo, London, São Paulo? Let us know. Your engagement means everything to us. Now settle in and prepare to be amazed by this unforgettable story that proves sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the most unexpected sources. Chapter 1. The Perfect Storm. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the Blackstone Industries headquarters in downtown Manhattan. At exactly 7:30 a.m., Margaret Chen pushed her cleaning cart through the executive floor, her worn sneakers making barely a whisper against the polished stone. She had been working as a cleaner for the past 3 years, invisible to most of the suited executives who rushed past her daily, their phones pressed to their ears, their minds consumed with deals worth millions. Margaret was different from what people assumed. Behind her quiet demeanor and simple uniform lay a brilliant mind that had once navigated the complex world of international business. Born in Hong Kong, she had earned her MBA from Columbia University 15 years ago, working for a prestigious consulting firm before life took an unexpected turn. A family crisis had forced her to leave everything behind to care for her aging mother, and when she finally returned to New York, the corporate world had moved on without her. Age discrimination and a gap in her resume had left her with few options, but Margaret was a survivor. She took the cleaning job with dignity, knowing that honest work was nothing to be ashamed of. As she dusted the conference room where she had once presented million-dollar strategies to Fortune 500 companies, Margaret couldn't help but smile at the irony. The same room where she had once commanded respect now knew her only as the woman who emptied the trash bins. Down the hall, Richard Blackstone III sat in his corner office, his hands trembling slightly as he stared at the documents spread across his mahogany desk. At 38, he had inherited Blackstone Industries from his father just 2 years ago, and despite his Harvard MBA and years of preparation, he felt like he was drowning. The company, which specialized in international trade and logistics, was facing its biggest crisis in decades. A major contract with a consortium of Asian investors was hanging by a thread, and today's meeting could determine whether the company survived or crumbled under the weight of its debts. Richard's assistant, Jennifer, knocked and entered with a steaming cup of coffee. "Mr. Blackstone, the Lin Corporation representatives will be here in 2 hours. The contracts are ready for your review, and the presentation is loaded on your laptop." Richard nodded, his throat feeling dry. He had been preparing for this meeting for weeks, but something felt wrong. The numbers didn't add up the way they should, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. The Lin Corporation, led by the formidable CEO Linda Lin, was known for their meticulous attention to detail and their ability to spot weaknesses in business proposals from miles away. "Jennifer, have you double-checked the logistics calculations for the Southeast Asia route?" Richard asked, his voice betraying his anxiety. "Yes, sir. Everything looks correct according to the reports from our logistics team," Jennifer replied, though she didn't sound entirely confident either. As Jennifer left, Richard returned to his documents, his mind racing. The Blackstone family had built their fortune on international trade, but the landscape had changed dramatically in recent years. New regulations, shifting political climates, and the rise of tech-savvy competitors had made the traditional ways of doing business obsolete. Richard knew he needed to adapt, but he felt like he was speaking a language he didn't fully understand. Meanwhile, Margaret had finished cleaning the conference room and was now working her way through the executive offices. As she emptied the trash bin near Richard's desk, she couldn't help but notice the scattered papers and the look of panic in his eyes. She had seen that look before. It was the same expression she had worn 15 years ago when she realized her career was slipping away. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackstone," Margaret said softly. her accented English careful and respectful. "I couldn't help but notice you seem stressed. Is everything all right?" Richard looked up, startled. He had barely noticed Margaret before, despite her daily presence in his office. "Oh, it's nothing. Just a big meeting today." Margaret nodded and continued her work, but her trained eye had already spotted something that made her heart race. Among the papers on Richard's desk, she could see logistics reports with glaring errors, the kind of mistakes that would immediately red flag any experienced international business professional. The shipping routes were inefficient. The cost calculations were based on outdated tariff information, and the timeline projections were completely unrealistic for the current political climate in Southeast Asia. As she moved to clean the next office, Margaret's mind was already working, calculating corrections and alternative solutions. She had spent years navigating these exact same challenges, and she could see the disaster that was about to unfold. The question was, should she say something or should she remain invisible as expected? The clock on the wall showed 9:15 a.m. In less than an hour, the most important meeting of Richard's life would begin, and he had no idea that his company's salvation might depend on the woman he barely acknowledged existed. Chapter 2: The Unraveling. The boardroom at Blackstone Industries had been transformed into a battlefield of polished mahogany and leather chairs. At exactly 10:30 a.m., the elevator doors opened to reveal Linda Lin and her team of 3 associates, each carrying sleek briefcases and wearing expressions of professional determination. Linda Lin, at 52, was a force of nature in the business world, a woman who had built her logistics empire from the ground up and who was known for her razor-sharp intellect and zero tolerance for incompetence. Richard stood to greet them, his palms sweating despite the air conditioning. "Miss Lin, welcome to Blackstone Industries. I trust your flight from Hong Kong was comfortable." Linda's handshake was firm and brief. "Let's skip the pleasantries, Mr. Blackstone. We're here to discuss business, not travel arrangements. I hope you're prepared to present something substantial." As they settled around the conference table, Richard felt his confidence wavering. Linda's reputation preceded her. She had turned down deals worth hundreds of millions when she detected even the slightest hint of incompetence or dishonesty. This meeting was Blackstone Industries' last chance to secure the contract that would save them from bankruptcy. "Before we begin," Linda said, opening her own folder, "I want to be clear about our expectations. We're looking for a logistics partner who understands the complexities of the Asian market, someone who can navigate the regulatory landscape and deliver results on time and under budget. We've had disappointing experiences with American companies who promise the world but deliver chaos." Richard nodded, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "Absolutely, Ms. Lin. Blackstone Industries has been operating in international markets for over 50 years. We understand the importance of—" "Show me the numbers," Linda interrupted, her dark eyes fixed on Richard with unwavering intensity. "I want to see your proposed shipping routes, your cost breakdowns, and your timeline projections." Richard activated the presentation on the large screen and immediately launched into his prepared speech. For the first 10 minutes, everything seemed to go smoothly. He discussed market opportunities, spoke about Blackstone's history, and outlined their vision for the partnership. But as he moved into the technical details, Linda's expression began to change. "Stop," Linda said suddenly, raising her hand. "Go back to slide 12. Richard's heart sank as he navigated back to the logistics breakdown. Linda stood up and walked to the screen, pointing at the shipping route diagram. "This route through the South China Sea, you're showing a transit time of 4 days. That's impossible given the current traffic patterns and inspection requirements. Any experienced logistics professional would know that." Her voice was cold, professional, but Richard could hear the disappointment underneath. Our team calculated those numbers based on optimal conditions," Richard stammered. "Optimal conditions?" Linda's associate, a sharp-eyed man named David Chang, spoke up. "Mr. Blackstone, optimal conditions don't exist in international shipping. We deal with reality, not fantasies." Linda returned to her seat, her expression now one of barely concealed irritation. "Continue with your presentation, but I have to tell you, what I'm seeing so far is deeply concerning." Richard pressed on, but the damage was done. With each slide, Linda and her team found more errors, more unrealistic projections, more evidence that Blackstone Industries was not the professional partner they were seeking. The cost calculations were based on tariff rates that had changed 6 months ago. The delivery timelines ignored seasonal weather patterns that any competent logistics company would factor in. The regulatory compliance section was a disaster, referencing outdated laws and missing entirely new requirements that had been implemented just last quarter. "Mr. Blackstone," Linda said after 20 minutes of increasingly painful exchanges, "I'm going to be direct with you. This presentation is amateurish. The numbers don't make sense. The timelines are unrealistic, and frankly, I'm questioning whether your company has the expertise to handle a partnership of this magnitude." Richard felt the walls closing in. His face flushed red as he realized that his entire presentation was falling apart. "Ms. Marklin, I assure you that we can address any concerns you might have. Perhaps we could schedule a follow-up meeting." "Mr. Blackstone," Linda interrupted, standing up again, "I've flown halfway around the world for this meeting. I cleared my schedule, brought my best team, and prepared extensively based on your company's promises. What I'm seeing here is either incompetence or dishonesty, and I'm not sure which is worse." The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Richard's mind was racing, trying to find a way to salvage the situation, but every word that came to his lips seemed inadequate. He could see his company's future crumbling in real time, and he was powerless to stop it. Outside the boardroom, Margaret had been cleaning the adjacent office when she heard the raised voices. Through the glass partition, she could see Richard's face, pale and desperate, as Linda Lynn paced near the presentation screen. Margaret's heart went out to him. She recognized the look of a professional drowning in their own inadequacy. But more than sympathy, Margaret felt a sense of professional outrage. She could see the presentation screen from where she stood, and the errors were so glaring, so elementary, that it was almost painful to watch. These were mistakes that would be caught by a first-year business student, let alone a seasoned CEO. The shipping route inefficiencies alone were costing the proposal millions in unnecessary expenses. As Linda Lynn prepared to deliver what was clearly going to be a final, devastating critique, Margaret found herself at a crossroads. She could continue cleaning, remain invisible, and watch as Richard's company collapsed. Or she could risk everything: her job, her carefully maintained anonymity, her safety, to try to help. The decision, when it came, surprised even her. Chapter 3. The Unlikely Intervention. Margaret took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. Setting down her cleaning supplies, she walked to the boardroom door and knocked gently. Through the glass, she could see Richard's confused expression as he noticed her standing there. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Margaret said as Richard reluctantly opened the door, "but I couldn't help but overhear that you're having some challenges with the logistics presentation." Linda Lynn turned around, her eyebrows raised in surprise. "And you are?" "Margaret Chen," she replied calmly, bowing slightly in the traditional Asian manner that immediately caught Linda's attention. "I'm part of the building maintenance staff, but I have some experience with international logistics, particularly in the Asian markets." Richard's face flushed with embarrassment. "Margaret, this really isn't the time." "Actually," Linda interrupted, her curiosity piqued, "I'd like to hear what she has to say. Please, Miss Chen, come in." Margaret entered the boardroom, acutely aware of how out of place she looked in her cleaning uniform among the expensive suits and polished shoes, but her voice was steady as she approached the presentation screen. "If I may," Margaret said, gesturing toward the displayed shipping route, "I noticed that this route through the South China Sea doesn't account for the seasonal monsoon patterns that affect shipping from July through October. Additionally, the new inspection protocols implemented by the Hong Kong Maritime Authority in March have extended processing times by an average of 18 hours. Linda's expression shifted from surprise to intense interest. "Go on." Margaret moved to the screen, pointing to specific locations on the map. "The current route also bypasses the Kaohsiung port in Taiwan, which has become a critical hub for trans-Pacific logistics since the infrastructure upgrades completed last year. By including Kaohsiung in the route, you could reduce overall transit time by at least 2 days and significantly decrease costs through their new expedited processing program." David Chang leaned forward in his chair. "How do you know about the Kaohsiung upgrades? That information isn't widely publicized." "I make it my business to stay informed about developments in international trade," Margaret replied simply. "The maritime industry is constantly evolving, and successful logistics depend on real-time information, not outdated assumptions. Linda stood up and walked closer to Margaret. "What else do you see wrong with this presentation?" Margaret glanced at Richard, who was staring at her with a mixture of shock and growing hope. "The tariff calculations are based on rates that changed 6 months ago. The current rates for electronics and manufactured goods are actually 12% lower than what's shown here, which would save approximately $2.3 million on the projected annual volume." "That's impossible," Richard said. "Our logistics team assured me those were the current rates." "With respect, Mr. Blackstone," Margaret said gently, "tariff rates change frequently, and the information needs to be verified weekly, not annually. The reduction I mentioned was part of the Phase 2 trade agreement modifications that went into effect in January." Linda's eyes were now fixed on Margaret with laser-like intensity. "Mrs. Chen, your English is excellent, but I detect a slight accent. Are you originally from Hong Kong?" "Yes. I was born in Hong Kong and lived there until I was 18. I completed my education here in New York, including an MBA from Columbia University, before returning to Hong Kong to work in international business consulting." The room fell silent as the implications of Margaret's revelation sank in. Richard stared at her as if seeing her for the first time, which in many ways he was. "Columbia MBA?" Linda asked. "So when did you graduate?" 2010. I worked for McKinsey & Company for 5 years, specializing in Asian market entry strategies for American companies, before returning to New York for personal reasons. Linda turned to Richard, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Blackstone, are you telling me that you have someone with Margaret's qualifications cleaning your offices while you present amateur-hour logistics proposals to potential partners?" Richard's face went through a series of emotions: embarrassment, realization, and something that might have been shame. I had no idea." "Margaret, why didn't you ever mention your background?" Margaret's smile was sad but not bitter. "In my experience, Mr. Blackstone, people see what they expect to see. I applied for consulting positions when I returned to New York, but the combination of my age, the gap in my resume, and certain biases in the industry made it difficult to find opportunities. I needed to work, and I'm not ashamed of honest labor." Linda walked back to her seat, but her posture had completely changed. "Ms. Chen, would you be willing to continue reviewing this presentation? I'm very interested in your insights." Margaret looked at Richard, who nodded eagerly. "Please, Margaret. Ms. Chen, we need your help." For the next hour, Margaret systematically deconstructed and rebuilt the logistics proposal. She identified cost savings that totaled over $8 million annually, proposed shipping routes that were 20% more efficient than the original plan, and outlined regulatory compliance strategies that would prevent the kind of delays that had plagued similar partnerships in the past. As she spoke, Margaret transformed before their eyes. Gone was the quiet woman who emptied trash bins and dusted desks. In her place stood a confident, knowledgeable professional who commanded the room with her expertise and insight. Linda's associates were frantically taking notes, asking detailed questions about port facilities, customs procedures, and market conditions. Margaret answered each question with precision and depth, demonstrating not just theoretical knowledge, but the kind of practical experience that comes from years of successful implementation. "This is extraordinary," Linda said finally. "Ms. Chen, your revised proposal addresses every concern I had about this partnership. More than that, it presents opportunities I hadn't even considered." Richard sat in stunned silence, watching Margaret command the respect of the most demanding business leader he had ever encountered. The woman he had barely acknowledged for 3 years was single-handedly saving his company. But as impressive as Margaret's presentation was, the real transformation was still to come. Chapter 4. The Power of Recognition. As Margaret concluded her comprehensive revision of the logistics proposal, the atmosphere in the boardroom had completely transformed. What had begun as a disaster was now shaping up to be one of the most promising business presentations Linda Lin had attended in years. "Ms. Chen," Linda said, closing her notebook and looking directly at Margaret, "I have to ask you something that's been bothering me since you walked into this room. How is it possible that someone with your qualifications and expertise is working as a cleaner?" Margaret straightened her shoulders, her dignity intact despite the circumstances. "Life doesn't always follow the paths we plan, Mrs. Lin. Sometimes survival requires us to take whatever opportunities are available, regardless of whether they match our qualifications." Linda's expression softened slightly. "I understand more than you might think. I started my own company after being passed over for promotion 3 times at my previous firm. They said I was too aggressive and didn't fit the company culture. Sometimes the business world's loss becomes an entrepreneur's gain." Richard had been listening to this exchange with growing discomfort. The realization that he had been blind to Margaret's incredible talents for 3 years was hitting him hard. "Margaret, I owe you an apology. I've been an idiot." "Mr. Blackstone," Margaret said gently, "you're not an idiot. You're a good man who inherited a complex business during challenging times. The problem isn't your intelligence or your character. It's that you've been trying to navigate waters you don't fully understand with advice from people who don't understand them either." Linda stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "Ms. Chen, I'm going to make you an offer. I want you to come work for Lin Corporation as our Director of American Operations. The salary would be $180,000 annually, plus performance bonuses and full benefits. You would be based here in New York, overseeing our expansion into the American market." The room fell silent. Margaret felt her heart race. This was the kind of opportunity she had dreamed of for years. But as she looked at Richard's face, she saw something that made her pause. "Miss Lin, I'm honored by your offer, truly, but I think there might be a better solution for everyone involved." Linda turned back to the table, intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" Margaret looked at Richard, then back at Linda. "What if, instead of me joining your company, I stayed here and helped transform Blackstone Industries into the kind of partner you're looking for? You could have the logistics expertise you need, Mr. Blackstone could have the guidance his company requires, and I could have the opportunity to use my skills in a meaningful way." Richard's eyes widened. "Margaret, are you saying—" "I'm saying that Blackstone Industries has good bones, Mr. Blackstone. Your father built something solid, and you have the heart to lead it. You just need someone who understands the international landscape to help you navigate it." Linda considered this proposal, her business mind working through the implications. "It's an interesting idea, but I would need assurances. Miss Chen, would you be willing to serve as the primary liaison for this partnership? I would need to know that someone with your expertise was directly involved in the implementation of everything we discussed today." "Absolutely," Margaret replied, "but I would need Mr. Blackstone's agreement to restructure my role here significantly." Richard stood up, his voice stronger than it had been all day. "Margaret, I want to offer you the position of Vice President of International Operations, effective immediately. The salary would be $160,000 annually, plus profit sharing and a comprehensive benefits package. More importantly, you would have full authority to restructure our logistics operations and build the team you need to succeed." Margaret felt emotions she hadn't experienced in years: hope, excitement, and the satisfaction of being truly valued for her abilities. "I accept, Mr. Blackstone, and I promise you won't regret this decision." Linda smiled, the first genuine smile she had shown all day. "Excellent. Miss Chen, I want to schedule a follow-up meeting next week to discuss the detailed implementation timeline. And Mr. Blackstone, I have to say, your willingness to recognize talent and adapt shows me that you might be the right partner for Lin Corporation after all." As the meeting concluded, Linda and her team shook hands with both Richard and Margaret. David Chang pulled Margaret aside as they prepared to leave. "Ms. Chen," he said quietly, "what you did today was remarkable. It takes courage to step out of the shadows and claim your place. I hope you know that." Margaret smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Chang. Sometimes the most important step is simply believing that you deserve to be seen." After Linda's team left, Richard and Margaret found themselves alone in the boardroom. The contrast between the morning's panic and the afternoon's triumph was almost surreal. "Margaret," Richard said, "I don't know how to thank you. You didn't just save this deal, you saved my company. But more than that, you showed me something about leadership that I never understood before." "What's that, Mr. Blackstone?" "That real leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about recognizing when someone else has the expertise you need and having the humility to let them lead. You've been here for 3 years, and I never saw you. I'm ashamed of that." Margaret's expression was kind but firm. "The past is the past, Mr. Blackstone. What matters now is what we do going forward, and I have some ideas about that." As they began to discuss the future of Blackstone Industries, both Margaret and Richard understood that this day had changed everything. The invisible woman had become visible, the struggling CEO had found his greatest asset, and a company on the brink of collapse had discovered a path to unprecedented success. But the real transformation was just beginning. Chapter 5. The New Dawn. 6 months later, the Blackstone Industries headquarters buzzed with an energy that hadn't been felt in years. The executive floor, where Margaret had once pushed her cleaning cart in silence, now hummed with the activity of a thriving international business. Margaret's corner office, formerly a storage room, had been transformed into a command center for the company's expanding Asian operations. The morning sun streamed through the windows as Margaret reviewed the quarterly reports with her team. The numbers were extraordinary. Profits were up 340%. They had secured partnerships with 5 major Asian corporations, and Blackstone Industries was being featured in Forbes as one of the year's most impressive business turnarounds. "Ms. Chen," said James Morrison, Margaret's newly hired logistics coordinator. "The Singapore office is reporting that the new route through Kaohsiung has reduced shipping times by an average of 2.3 days, exactly as you projected. The client satisfaction scores are through the roof." Margaret smiled, remembering the day she had first suggested that route revision. "Excellent work, James. What's the status on the Malaysia expansion?" "We're ahead of schedule. The regulatory approvals came through yesterday, and construction on the new distribution center begins next month." As her team filed out for their various meetings, Margaret took a moment to look around her office. The walls were decorated with maps of shipping routes, photos from her recent business trips to Hong Kong and Singapore, and a small framed picture of her and her mother, the woman whose illness had initially derailed Margaret's career, but who had ultimately taught her the resilience that made this comeback possible. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Richard entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing a smile that had become much more common over the past 6 months. "Good morning, Margaret. I brought you your usual black coffee with just a touch of cream." "Thank you, Richard. Please, sit down. How did the board meeting go?" Richard settled into the chair across from her desk, his posture relaxed in a way that would have been impossible 6 months ago. "Better than I ever imagined. The board is thrilled with our performance. They've approved the expansion budget for next year, and they want to know if we're ready to explore opportunities in South America." Margaret laughed. "Are you asking me if I know anything about South American markets? I'm asking if you think we're ready for that kind of growth. A year ago, I would have been terrified by the prospect. Now, with you leading our international operations, I feel like we can take on the world." Their relationship had evolved dramatically over the past months. Richard had proven himself to be an eager student, learning not just about international business, but about leadership, humility, and the importance of recognizing talent wherever it might be found. Margaret had discovered that beneath his initial panic and privilege, Richard was genuinely committed to doing right by his employees and his company. "I've been thinking about something," Margaret said, leaning back in her chair. "Do you remember what you said to me that day in the boardroom? About leadership being about recognizing when someone else has the expertise you need?" Richard nodded. "It was one of the most important lessons I've ever learned." "Well, I think it's time we applied that lesson more broadly. I want to propose something to you." Margaret opened her laptop and turned it so Richard could see the screen. "I've been working on this for the past month. It's a proposal for a company-wide program I'm calling Hidden Talents Initiative." Richard leaned forward, reading the document with growing interest. "You want to create a system for identifying underutilized skills and talents among all our employees?" "Exactly. Think about it, Richard. If someone with my background could be overlooked for 3 years, how many other people in this company have skills and knowledge that we're not using? How many of our security guards have military logistics experience? How many of our administrative assistants have language skills that could help us with international clients? How many of our maintenance staff have technical expertise that could improve our operations?" Richard's eyes lit up as he understood the implications. This could revolutionize how we think about human resources. "More than that," Margaret continued, "it could revolutionize how we think about people. Everyone has a story, Richard. Everyone has skills and experiences that might not be reflected in their current job title. The question is, are we willing to see them? As if summoned by their conversation, there was another knock at the door. Jennifer, Richard's assistant, entered with a young man Margaret didn't recognize. "Mr. Blackstone, Miss Chen," Jennifer said. "I'd like you to meet Carlos Mendoza. He's been working in our mailroom for the past year, but he mentioned to me that he has some interesting ideas about our delivery systems." Carlos stepped forward, nervous but determined. "Ms. Chen, I heard about how you went from cleaning to running international operations. I wanted to ask if you might have a few minutes to look at some efficiency improvements I've been working on." Margaret and Richard exchanged a meaningful look. Margaret stood up and extended her hand to Carlos. "Of course, Carlos. Please, have a seat and tell us about your ideas." As Carlos began to explain his innovative approach to package routing, ideas that demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of logistics optimization, Margaret felt a familiar sense of recognition. She saw in Carlos's eyes the same hunger for opportunity that she had carried for years, the same quiet confidence that came from knowing you had something valuable to offer if only someone would listen. An hour later, as Carlos left the office with a promise of a follow-up meeting and a potential promotion to the logistics department, Richard shook his head in amazement. "It's happening again, isn't it?" he said. "We almost missed another hidden talent." Margaret nodded. "But this time, we didn't miss it. We saw it, we recognized it, and we acted on it. That's the difference between the company we were and the company we're becoming." As the day wound down, Margaret found herself back in the boardroom where everything had changed 6 months ago. She was preparing for a video conference with Linda Lin, who had become not just a business partner, but a trusted advisor and friend. When Linda's face appeared on the screen, she was smiling broadly. "Margaret, I just reviewed the quarterly performance reports. Lin Corporation's partnership with Blackstone Industries has exceeded every projection we made. You've built something remarkable there." "We've built something remarkable," Margaret corrected. "This success belongs to everyone who was willing to look beyond the surface and see what was really there." Linda's expression grew more serious. "I want to ask you something I've been wondering about for months. Do you ever regret not taking my offer to join Lin Corporation?" Margaret considered the question carefully. "Linda, 6 months ago, I would have said that your offer was the opportunity of a lifetime. And it was. But staying here, helping to transform this company from the inside out, building something new while honoring something old, this has been the opportunity of several lifetimes. And Richard, how has he grown as a leader?" Margaret smiled, thinking of the man who had once panicked in this very room. "Richard has learned that true strength comes from admitting what you don't know and surrounding yourself with people who do know. He's learned that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions and listening to the answers, even when they come from unexpected sources." As the call ended, Margaret gathered her things and prepared to leave the office. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and undoubtedly new hidden talents waiting to be discovered. Walking past the security desk, she stopped to chat with Maria, the evening security guard who had mentioned she spoke 4 languages. Next week, Maria would be starting her new role as a cultural liaison for Blackstone's expanding European operations. In the elevator, Margaret reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been invisible, undervalued, and seemingly forgotten by the professional world. Today, she was a respected executive, a mentor to rising talent, and a testament to the power of perseverance and the importance of being seen. As the elevator doors opened onto the lobby, Margaret Chen, no longer the invisible woman, but a leader who made others visible, stepped out into the New York evening, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. The transformation was complete, but the story was just beginning. The end. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. Remember, everyone has hidden talents waiting to be discovered. Sometimes we just need to be willing to see them. Until next time, keep believing in the power of recognition and the magic that happens when we truly see each other.